Hey everyone, Katie from Responders for Pride here. And just a heads up, in this episode, we explore personal stories about trauma and its effects. We touch on sensitive topics like suicidal thoughts, unsettling feelings, and traumatic events. Please take good care of yourself while engaging with the content. And if you're having a tough time, remember that help is always within reach. You can text BADGE to 741-741. Contact SafeCall, a 24/7 crisis support line for first responders at 206-459-3020, or visit safecallnow.us for support. Thanks again for listening. We hope you find these brave and vulnerable stories helpful. Sorry, I'm having struggles, so just continue to chat.
I'm actually going to go blow my nose.
Be back. Love that for you. All right, are we about ready?
I'm ready whenever you are.
Ready? Yeah, let's have this hard talk.
Okay.
Okay.
So, in 3,
Pull up the
2,
camera.
I know, I'm very professional. And action. Okay. Welcome. No, hold on.
No.
Take two.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Take 2. Welcome, everyone, to the RfP Podcast, where courage meets community. We're here to uplift the LGBTQIA+ first responder community and their allies with real talk, bold stories, and unapologetic pride. Whether you wear a uniform, love someone who does, or simply care about building a more inclusive world, you are in the right place. So let's spark some change, break some stigmas, and have a little fun along the way, as always. I am your host, Katie. I'm a licensed mental health clinician and a Leo spouse.
I'm your other host, Nicola, EMS Lieutenant and President of Responders for Pride. We are very excited for our next episode in our Spotlight Series because today we're taking a deep dive into post-traumatic stress, from personal struggles to milestones in healing. We're going to cover as much as we can so you, our listeners, can feel less alone, more supported in the possibilities for healing and recovery. And with that, I'd like to warmly welcome back our guest, Public Safety Officer, Christina Ellis.
Yay.
Welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yeah.
We're just so glad that you're back with us, but also that you're like brave enough to have this conversation, because this might not be the easiest of conversations.
Well, I think it's an important conversation to have. It affects so many of us, and there's such a stigma about it that people are afraid to talk about it. So
Yeah.
I'm not afraid anymore.
Chills.
Yeah. Right off the bat, like
Love it. I'm not afraid anymore. But I think that also highlights that it's so normal and valid to be afraid to have that conversation, and that it's so, so important that when you decide to start opening up about this, it is that autonomous choice that you're giving yourself the permission, and that it feels aligned. It may not feel scary, right? It might still feel scary, but if it aligns with where you're at, then that's probably the most important thing, because you don't want to feel forced or pressured to talk about things before you're ready to either. So I want to lay out a little bit of terminology in terms of how I'm going to reference it, but also invite everyone to reference it the way that it feels right to them. I prefer the term post-traumatic injury, post-traumatic stress injury, PTSI. So I might use all those different terms. That's just because that's a way of referring to post-traumatic stress in a non-pathologizing way. And as a person, also as a clinician, it's really important for me. It's kind of baked into my vernacular of like removing stigma can be a part of like removing the label of like a disorder, right? This diagnosable language, and recognizing that post-traumatic stress is far more prevalent than we'll probably ever realize. And in part, that's because we put this big label on it that says, okay, you're disordered. And so I try to use language that gets away from that. That being said, there's nothing wrong with referring to it as PTSD.
yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I
Actually,
think,
can I hit on that really quick? Because
please.
that actually kind of made my mind blow up a little bit, because I really struggled with that when I was going through treatment, in that I kept beating myself up thinking, what is wrong with me? Why I'm, I have partners doing the same thing, seeing the
Yeah.
same things. Why is this so hard for me? And it was my therapist was the one that actually said, you have to stop beating yourself up for this. You have to think of it as your brain is injured. And it's no different than a firefighter with a back injury, or, the cop who blew out their ankle in a foot chase, and it was at that point when she made that connection that I started to, I guess, give myself some grace and realize, okay, I'm not, it's not a disorder. My brain is actually injured. And so I really like that you touched on that.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that. I think there are a lot of different ways that we can remove and start breaking down stigma. And those are two great examples of just, the language we use and the way that we frame it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious, what were some of the earlier signs that maybe indicated to you that there was some percolating trauma that wasn't just kind of going away, that you weren't just like able to move on from, that was sticking around and affecting your daily life?
For me, I think it's a slow progression, right? It's like it sneaks up on you, I think.
Yeah.
And so my story is, public safety officer. We do police, we do fire. And during my career, I was a detective for 13 years. And in the course of that, I did sex crimes. I also assisted with homicides and child abuse and child porn investigations. So I always say it was my 5 years as a sex crimes detective that really screwed me up the most in my career. But
Understand.
so I was exposed to a lot of violence, a lot of trauma. I didn't understand, or I'd never heard of vicarious trauma.
Mm.
And I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but I think as first responders, our trauma isn't necessarily things that happen directly to us, but things that we've been exposed to. And I certainly had no knowledge of that going into this career. But it was the course of doing a lot of homicides, seeing things people shouldn't see, I guess, and the trauma to children. Now, when I was going through that and doing those cases, I didn't have kids at the time. I didn't even think I wanted kids. I have a son now, but so I was always like, this doesn't bother me. I don't have kids. This doesn't bother me. And I had one particularly bad case where I had to catalog child pornography, and I had spent like 40 hours one week just viewing, and okay, this isn't, so that we could prosecute, and just being exposed to all of those images. And it was at the end of that week, I was just like too much, right? And I remember driving home, and I lived on a lake at the time. So my girlfriend, when you live on a lake, you always have company, right? Everybody wants to be at the lake. And I was driving home, and I pulled down our road, and I see cars in the driveway, and I'm just like, I can't be around people right now. So I I called her, and I'm like, I'm gonna make the block, but I need everybody gone when I come back. And she's like, yep, no problem. And so I come back, and I walk in the house, and I'm just like dazed, like you're just in this daze. And I go out, and I sit down, and I just start bawling. And I'm like, and I didn't understand it, because I'm like, I don't know these kids, like, but I couldn't get their eyes, their eyes out of my face, and the look on their face. I couldn't get that out of my mind. And so I just bawled and bawled and bawled. Anyway, that was years ago. And then, I cried, I got it out. I thought, I got it out, and I went on, and you're good, right? That's what we do. I talked to
What we
her
do.
about it, got it out of my system.
Yeah.
Well, then years later, we decided to have a child. And so during my pregnancy, I told my boss, I said, I don't, when I come back from maternity leave, I don't want to do sex crimes anymore. And they're like, yeah, okay, no problem. And so I went back to general assignment and everything was fine. And honestly, I didn't really think about those things anymore. I mean, we all know everything you see is always there, never goes away, but it gets cataloged, it gets, stored away. Well, when my son was probably about 3.5, I think, I remember sitting out on on our porch, and I was watching him play in the front yard, and out of nowhere, I get this intrusive image. I've learned is what they're called. I get this intrusive image in my mind, and it's him being sodomized. And it was these images I'd seen, years ago. But now my mind is showing me with him. And that was kind of the start of, I would say, realizing that something was wrong, something was going on. And and then it started to change because I worked a lot of, homicide cases or death cases, accidental deaths. And I would start to see him. I'd be in the kitchen, he's out, in the yard playing. And the older he got, the more this progressed. And, I'd be like, oh, I bet he's dead. I bet he's out there hanging, accidentally hung himself in the backyard, and I would see this and I'd go look, and he's not, of course. And, or he'd be taking a bath and I'd go down to, get a glass of water, and I'd be like, well, that was probably enough time for him to drown. I'm sure he's dead, and I'm like, does this happen to like normal parents? Like, this doesn't seem like this is something that most parents think about. And when he got old enough to, he was riding his bike, and the first time I let him ride down to his friend's house it was on the same street, right? But there was just a little bit of a dip where he goes out of my vision for a minute. I'm like, well, he's probably been abducted now. And I know, we've got so many hours to find him alive, and I'm going to have to just start going door to door, and he's going to be in somebody's freezer, because these are all shit I've seen. And so, it really just started to and I started to question that, like, do other parents have these thoughts? Like, do they see their kids dead? And, so it started getting heavier and heavier, and I wasn't sharing this, even with my wife, and, because I didn't know what was going on. And then where it got really bad is, my mind started, and this is what was really scary for me. And I didn't share this with a lot of people, even my therapist initially, because I'm like, I think they'll probably take my kid away from me. But my mind started showing me doing things to him. And that's when I was really like, what the hell is going on? Like, I love my child more than anything. I would never hurt him. Why is my mind showing me doing things to my son? And so that's when I knew there was a problem. And I was actually, and again, I hadn't shared this with anybody. And I was actually at a party for my best friend at the time. She was a prosecutor, and she had just gotten promoted or gotten a new job with the United States prosecuting attorney's office. And so I'm at this party with her, and there's like judges and prosecutors, and her parents were there. And I'm talking to her dad. And this has happened to me many times over my career, where people are like, wow, I don't know how you do what you do. Like, just that's amazing. And I've always been like, I do this because it needs to be done. I do it because I can. I do it so you don't have to. It's a job that somebody has to do. It's always been my cross to bear. And this is what I do. Well, he says that to me, like, I don't know how you do what you do. And I burst out crying. Like, I couldn't hold it in anymore. And I'm like, I don't know how I do it either, and I'm bawling, and poor Mr. Sadford hates emotions, and he's like, oh, let me go get my other daughter. She's a therapist, right? He's like, and so he goes and gets his other daughter, and I'm talking to her. It's so embarrassing because I'm at this party and I'm in the corner bawling, and she's like, honey, you've got vicarious trauma. And that was kind of the first time I'd heard about this. And she's like, and I'm like, I I don't know what to do. What's wrong with me? I'm like broken. And she's like, you got to go get therapy. So I called my therapist, and we started working through it. But again, I didn't tell her fully what was going on because I was afraid. And ultimately, I did tell her, and she explained it to me in a way. Well, first of all, she's like, you've got PTSD, and I'm like, but I didn't shoot anybody. Like none of this stuff happened to me. Right? Like I have not been the victim. I haven't shot anyone. Like I can't have PTSD. And then she explained that, yes, we do have PTSD from the things we've seen, not just from being in war or shooting people. But that was another hurdle. I'm like, I
It
thought
is trauma.
right, right. Like, no. And then she explained to me about the things I was seeing as far as me doing things to my own child was, it's like your brain's way of showing you the worst case scenario. Um, she explained it much better than I can, but she compared it to like people who are standing on the edge of a cliff, taking in the view, and suddenly they see themselves jumping off. It's
Or
like
pushing someone.
right. Our mind shows us the worst case scenario so that it makes it not as bad, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
But yeah, for me, it was just those little bits of, I should have recognized it sooner, with those first few images, but we tend to push things down and write them off. And like, that's until it was just too much and I couldn't hold it in anymore.
I call it the Rolodex, right? Because I see one thing and then it's just Rolodex through, right? So maybe I've had a pedestrian struck, right? And then every little one just keeps coming up, right? And I'm with you on the intrusive thoughts, right?
Yeah, they're awful.
They're awful and they pop up at the weirdest times. They just
do.
come in. And something that struck with me is like you said that you didn't share it with your partner, right, at the time.
Right.
And I don't do that either when those intrusive thoughts come in or things like that, because I don't want to put the burden of what I'm seeing on somebody else.
Right.
Right. I don't want to put the burden of what's going through my injured brain into like my wife and my kids and
injure them.
Yeah.
Right, because I'm injured enough. I don't need to, then I'm putting that burden on them, and then again that's injuring me more, right?
Right.
Because I'm like, I
Right.
can't do that to them. But I again, I'm diagnosed with PTSD, complex PTSD, all of those great things. And I it was somebody else that noticed it in me for what was happening with me. It wasn't me, it was my wife. And it was probably about 3 months after I had a really bad call. I had a police officer that was shot. Um, and I've mentioned this before, but I went into the house. The house was unsafe. There was flashbangs, gunpowder, all those things. That's not the environment for us, right? But I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna try to save what I can. And I knew with one motion that I was about to break 1,000 hearts, right? And we had got to the back of the ambulance after getting out of the crazy scene. And my back doors, I look at my back doors and there's just cops. And the one thing that I do that's about to break 1,000,000 hearts is push on that man's chest, right? I actually had to look away because the tears had just started flowing. And that was my call, but I didn't realize it. To me, it was a bad call. I went home that morning, turned off my phone, didn't talk to anybody. My wife could tell you what happened on the call because of the nightmares that I was having. She could tell you from beginning to end what happened on the call, and I didn't tell her anything. Like went back to work, wasn't sleeping, wasn't doing those things. Nightmares started coming in, right? And then seeing the Rolodex started of seeing all the other people that I had seen shot and the people that I have seen injured and things like that. And I would drink every night, right? I would have a drink every night because that would numb and allow me to sleep. Not
Yeah.
great, but at least sleep. And my wife said, I think you should probably not drink as much. And I was like, I'm just having 2 drinks a night. And she was like, I'm just saying that maybe we shouldn't drink as much. And I was like, okay. And then she had said probably about 3-4 months after that incident that you needed to get help. And I was like, no, I'm fine. Right. I'm fine.
Mhm.
Yeah, it wasn't until 5 years later that I got dispatched to another police officer shot that it hit because my heart rate went up to 120. It would not come down from 120 for 4 days. It just stayed there. Like I stayed in fight or flight response mode. And I made a phone call to a friend that had talked about like where they were getting help and things like that. And I was like, I need the number. And that number still sat in my phone for another 4 days before I was like, I need to make this phone call, right? Because I just, everything, all of the feelings, everything was coming in. Even at work, like everything changed, right? Just the way that I was acting and things like that. So it was,
What do you mean by
right,
the way you were acting?
more reserved, more quiet. I'm not a quiet person at work. Like if I get like frustrated on a call or something like that, people are going to know that I am frustrated on a call if things are not going the way that they should be going. Um, and I was at the point where I was like, whatever, just let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to the hospital, right? It wasn't me. I wasn't being the provider that I had always been. I wasn't being the friend and like mentor that I had always been at work. Um, Nobody said anything though at work, right? It was thankfully to Stephanie that I was able to get the help that I needed. Um, but like it's see, brain injury for both of us, different pathways, right?
Mhm.
To be able to get where we're going.
Mhm.
But I continue now with Rolodexes, right? Every now and again. Um, like, and that triggering moment, and that's when you notice it impacts your life, right? Is like every now and again you have a call, atrocious calls, right? I had 6 people like smushed to death on 695. There was bodies everywhere. Fine, right?
Right.
2 weeks later, I get a guy that's hit by a car and he has a tib fib, and I'm done,
Right.
right? Because that was the trigger. Because that big incident, I had to be in control. I was more worried about my providers and things like that. So it's like it's weird how the little things can come up and how they impact your life on different moments.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. I don't remember if this was before or after I broke down at that party, but I remember driving home one day from work and I had the radio. I always have the radio on. So I don't remember specifically if something bad happened at work, but I remember driving home and just started bawling. And the only thing I could think of is my son's going to die.
Mhm.
I don't know when, I don't know how, but he's going to die. And it was just like, I was just paralyzed in
Yeah.
this fear that I can't protect him. I don't know how, but like he's just like he's probably going to be dead when I get home. Like
It could
Yeah.
it
be.
was just awful. And I think like I think I did a really good job at suppressing a lot of this stuff for like I don't think people at work noticed,
Right.
what was going on. Um I did Yeah, I do think my wife noticed a change.
Mhm.
We're divorced now, whether that had anything to do with it. She also actually had a back injury. She was a cop too, and she had a back injury. So she was dealing with her own difficulties of her life being changed because she can't do the things she used to be able to do. And then I am going through my brain injury, which I didn't realize at the time what it was. So yeah, I was drinking more, certainly to help cope with the things my mind was showing me. And I'd also I'd shut down sexually in our relationship because I didn't want to be intimate with her and have these thoughts of things happening to my son show up because I didn't want to associate anything pleasurable with those thoughts, right? So
Yeah.
I shut down. sexually, and I wouldn't tell her why, so it definitely had an effect on our marriage. And I did get help before the divorce, but we ended up getting divorced a few years later after that, again, we're both dealing with our own traumas from the job.
Okay, I just want to invite a deep breath. Take a drink. Um, just kind of a little bit of space here, both for you, for us, and also listeners. Um, and I want to just kind of highlight the different signs that you guys shared about noticing. Let me know if there's anything that you feel like this list is missing. Um, but just to kind of have this almost like a bullet point list of some really clear indications that something deeper, something more significant could be going on inside of you. And because you're living in it and you're immersed in it and it's the air you breathe, right? That it can be really hard to put those things together and add it up to, oh, this might be something that needs to be addressed. So, isolation, just a noticeable pullback from connection and the capacity to connect, right? So, like, not just, I don't want to, I hate small talk now, or like, I don't want to, like, I don't have the energy, right? But like the actual noticeable difference of my system looks at socializing like, just bad. Doesn't feel good, doesn't pull you in like it maybe used to, especially if it's like a big difference, right? Especially if you're a particularly social person or like historically you've had a pretty good social balance in your life and that's turning into more isolation. Something that you mentioned, Chris, that really I want to highlight is confusion. Is feeling really consistently confused. This kind of incongruence with who you know yourself to be and like these things that you're experiencing. They don't align and it can be really scary and confusing.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
You also mentioned like the heavier and heavier, right? And so something that you shared is like how you'd have these like moments of intense emotional expression, felt emotional intensity, right? And then it would get locked back up again.
Yeah.
And that can be, like you mentioned, that can be like misconstrued as like, oh, well, I got it out.
Yeah.
So it's out of me now. I'm done with that now. Moving on now because I expressed my feelings.
I
That,
expressed it, I locked it down, it's good.
right. That one time I let myself feel I'm done. Um, but the sense of like, is that happening more often? Is the space in between those emotional points of expression feeling more intense, literally physically heavier to hold and carry, to contain? And then that kind of looks to kind of again, this is more of a clinical term, but emotional dysregulation. So noticing less capacity to contain and compartmentalize and just manage emotional experiences, right? Kind of like disproportionate reactions to things. Someone, you know, accidentally bumps into your favorite coffee mug and it breaks and you lose your shit just completely, right? And so having more of those moments is a big sign, I think, particularly for first responders, but we'll kind of get into that a little bit in a moment. Feedback from others. Nick, you really shared how like that was a pivotal piece of your process of being open to and noticing, oh hey, like people really important to me are telling me they're noticing these things, or maybe there's a pattern of different people saying, "Hey, you okay?" Or like, "I've been noticing like you have been more quiet
Right.
and like reserved lately," which is different than like what I know about you. Like, is there
Right.
something going on? So getting that feedback and starting to kind of maybe add that up, piece that together and say, okay, even if I still don't really feel like things are unmanageable or getting out of control or whatever, that is happening. And that's something I might want to just keep my thumb on the pulse of. Um, there are some kind of classic symptoms that you guys highlighted: nightmares, flashbacks. Nightmares are a part of the kind of like the clinical criteria of PTSD. That's very common. But the flashbacks I want to highlight a little bit, and you guys really did a great job sharing about how immersive flashbacks can be. And so when we think about flashbacks, I think a lot of people think you're having flashes of images in your mind and that's it. And sometimes it can be primarily that. But flashbacks are really full body immersive, right? Your brain basically puts you back in that experience. So you're not just seeing it, you're not just hearing it, but you're also feeling it, like as if you're there. So it's a lot more intense than I think people would realize.
I can have a smell send me into a flashback.
Absolutely. Olfactory
Yeah. Like all.
memory
Yep.
is significant. So a
Yep.
sound, right? When it comes to, especially when it comes to pairing up with traumatic memories that the brain holds on to. Noticing that daily life can trigger you very easily and in very confusing ways. I think you guys beautifully highlighted how it's like it's very unpredictable. They're from your logical brain can feel like no rhyme or reason for why walking into the grocery store sent you into a panic and you literally had to leave and go back to your car or go home and just like abandon ship. These are things that are extremely, extremely common that you want to start to notice. Like if that's starting to happen more and more, that's a clear indication something's going on. And it is not a failure. It is not a personal failure. It is information. We want to look at it as information that our system is trying to share with us. But that is a lot of the reframing that happens in this process, right? Of going from pre-help to getting help. Additionally, loss of empathy, that's huge. And I want to recognize that in the sense of how you described how, and this is a big piece of I think the particular way this shows up for first responders. And it's also a big piece of what can perpetuate trauma because you guys are really misunderstood with how your trauma presents, right? So you've got, you're on a scene and the news reporters are there and they're taking pictures and you guys are like laughing,
Mhm.
standing above a body,
Mhm.
right? This happens all the time, especially in our hyper media, social networking lives, right? It's like we're seeing so much content now of these snapshot moments that are taken out of context and misunderstood deeply. And just recognizing that when I say loss of empathy, I don't mean that you don't empathize. I mean that your system begins to condition to numb
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
these situations. And so then it can be perceived like you don't care.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Oh,
it's not dark. It's not dark humor, right? It's coping,
Yeah,
mhm.
because
right?
if we, yeah, we are on horrific scenes,
Yep.
right? And if we allowed ourselves to feel that,
Mhm.
we'd never be able to make it
Mm-mm.
No,
through the day.
no.
And
Mm.
you know, you don't you can't be on a scene crying,
Uh-huh.
right? You've got to keep your shit together.
Mhm.
And so yeah, we tell sick jokes, we, do everything but acknowledge what, I mean, we
Right.
do our job,
Right.
you know. Obviously we
And,
do our
and
job, but we do anything we can to not acknowledge the pain or the suffering
yeah,
or the
I know
trauma.
you're going through your list real quick, but I
Yeah.
had one call where I had a pedestrian struck and the girlfriend had seen everything that happened. And she was like, can I go say goodbye? And I got it that we could go over and say goodbye. And I was expecting to take her over. She grabbed my hand and she pulled me down with her. And she let everything out. And I was crying next to her. And every firefighter that I made eye contact with or anything like that had no idea what to do with me at that point in time.
Mhm.
Because again, it changed everything that was happening on the scene to being controlled and calm to, I don't know what to do anymore, right?
Yeah.
Because we took that control part away because I could not help it. Like when somebody is doing what this person was doing, right? It took that. So it's not us being like not trying to not feel the empathy. It's us trying to get through the call and
Do the job that
do
we have to
the
do.
job that we have to do. Yeah.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah.
So that I feel like highlights the element of conditioning, right? This really important process that is really deeply misunderstood by both, I think, a lot of first responders themselves and certainly by community broadly speaking,
Right.
of it does not match up with what we expect humans to do and how they react to those situations typically. And what I implore listeners to consider is that it is vital that our first responders have this conditioned response so that they can manage the work and do the job. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot less first responders, and we're already desperate for them. We're already understaffed across the country, which is putting more and more pressure on the ones who are still here doing the job. And so I just want to highlight that that is a fundamental aspect of the necessity of coping and functioning and doing the work. Also, when it comes to loss of empathy, we can see that spill over at home. And when it comes to compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma, this is an unfortunate consequence that can come where the individual can start to sense again that numbing is indiscriminate, right? So it can start to feel like I don't care.
Yeah.
It can start to feel like I'm watching this thing and holy fuck, everyone around me is crying. Um, I don't feel that. What is wrong with me? But also, like, it can just present in a lot of ways. It can also look like at home, the first responder kind of starting to say, like, everyone here is being hyper emotional and I'm the only calm, reasonable one because I don't feel the thing. And so I can be calm and rational and non emotional when I actually need to be, right? When it would be really important or appropriate to be more emotional, and then you can't access that. And so it's so complex. And it really starts to bleed over and become very confusing in terms of you can't just turn this shit on and off,
Be nice if you could.
right? We would not be having this conversation. Oh,
I remember a point when I was just so burned out, right? I was
mm,
just like I started to hate my job. I started to hate going into work. I remember every morning driving into work thinking, I just wish a garbage truck would slam into my car so that I didn't have to go to work.
Yeah.
thank you for bringing that up, Chris, because one of the least talked about signs are those kind of passive suicidal thoughts. And I if you're more interested in that, we like me and Nick did a conversation a while back. It's recorded on our YouTube page, all about like talking about suicide and ways to support those who are parasuicidal in the sense of like not actively suicidal. I try to explain to people clinically and just like socially, just for awareness, that typically suicidal ideation, active suicidal ideation, are brief moments. It's all the space around those moments that we have so much more capacity to make change and offer healing, but we're so afraid of it. And so we treat all of it like that moment. We react to all of it like that. Everything's that terrifying moment. And I can appreciate deeply, sincerely, when your loved one, the one that, ones that you are closest to, are coming to you and sharing this. It feels like that moment. It feels like this is this is a high risk situation. Sometimes it is. A lot of times it is not, in the sense of being passively suicidal, right? Someone who is saying, I don't want to exist. Someone saying, I wish I could just, I go to work and I'm not going to go into like a list of examples because we don't need to, be triggering in that way. But all those kind of ways of just ending the pain and the suffering, escaping the pain and the suffering, and having almost fantasies about not being in pain anymore, not suffering anymore. And this is actually when we're talking about, and I know we're like still on like the first question there, but we've really expanded when we're talking about this point at which we go from needing help to starting to seek help. SI can start to really increase because you're feeling the pressure of feeling like you still have to deal with it all by yourself. You have to contain it and not tell anyone, and that really makes the suffering worse, which then can really instigate more SI or PSI. And it's when you start to connect and get help those symptoms actually typically tend to start to dissipate more and become more manageable, not necessarily go away all the time, but become more manageable. The suffering starts to decrease. So I want to thank you for bringing that up, because that's such an important piece of this, that I feel like hadn't been quite touched on yet. I want to touch on two more signs before we move on, and that is substance use and abuse. So just putting that out there, of like such high prevalence of co-occurrence with, particularly with PTSI among first responders. There's this pressure again to deal with this all by yourself, right? And so you're going to naturally look to the things that you can do, the behaviors that will continue to facilitate managing all by yourself, even if it's really, really temporary and it becomes more problematic. The idea is still, but this is helping me in this moment, and I need help, and I can't get help anywhere else. So
Right.
this is my option. And when we frame it that way, it does become hopefully a little bit more understanding. Hopefully we can make more space for empathy for the person going through that it's like, okay, this is not someone intentionally trying to cause themselves more pain or other people around them more pain. This is someone suffering who's trying to actually relieve their pain, and they don't know any other way. And then I want to talk about the loss of desire, what we might also reference as like low or no libido, and in like impotence, because that is a huge piece, again, of trauma that plays out in daily life that we don't talk about and we don't want to talk about. And we're really ashamed to talk about. And so this is again, when you are consistently suffering internally, your system is not in a place to invite that state of being, that place of sexual desire, of receiving and giving pleasure, like all of these elements that are really wrapped into our sexual identity or our sexual orientation of our experiences, not our orientation, but our experiences. That is a part of us that is usually inaccessible for good reason. I mean, if you just consider survival at its basic level, like historically speaking, if you were running from, a hyena, you weren't thinking about fucking someone, like you just weren't. And it wouldn't have been helpful if you were. So considering it in that regard of like when we are experiencing post-traumatic injury, we are literally reliving the trauma over and over again on a cognitive, emotional, and physiological level. So we're living it. It's happening to us again and again internally. It might not match the external world, but it's happening. Well, we're not in a place to connect safely and in that capacity, typically, not for everybody, but for a lot of people, we see that that's a big sign that can be taken into consideration. Thoughts,
Yeah.
feedback? Do we miss anything?
No, I think it's all pretty spot on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think some will
Pretty,
probably pop up as we go along talking
Yeah.
more, right? But yeah.
I just have to say again, I appreciate how like your both you sharing of your experiences was it's so comprehensive and how you highlighted all these ways that one can start to notice.
Mhm.
That was a pretty extensive list. So thank you guys for highlighting all those things and being willing to share those experiences because I think it's going to be helpful for people.
Well, thank you for breaking it all down like that. I mean, it all makes sense.
Yeah, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Ugh. So I'm wondering, we've talked about this a little bit already. I've kind of talked about it a little bit already, but in your perspectives, how do you think these things show up differently? How do you think like PTSI or post-traumatic stress shows up a little bit differently or maybe presents differently for the first responder community compared to maybe like the general population? Do you see that there's distinctions?
I think our ability to hide it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do this because
Mm-hmm.
is better, at least our perceived ability to hide it. And like we said, because on calls, we have to be controlled. We have to be able to function. So, when you go through the academy, and I'm sure it was the same for you, it was like you drop your feelings at the door and you leave them there. You can pick them up on the way back out, right?
Feel
But
free.
feel free. But your feelings are at the door and you just got to do this job. You signed up for this job. You signed up to see the things that you're going to see. You signed up to see humanity just blatantly traumatizing each other.
At their
Um,
worst.
yeah. And this is what you signed up for. So you suck it up. So I feel like many of us try to hold that persona,
Mm-hmm.
right? Hold that line of this will not affect me. I will not allow it. And if it does, I will cry. I will be angry. I will have a drink and it will all be over.
I think that what I see is, know, from a law enforcement perspective, I'm responding to a lot of calls, a lot of people's trauma. In the civilian world, I think it's a lot more accepted that they will tell me, "Oh, I've got PTSD. I've got PTSI." It's like I don't want to say they're proud of it, but they're not ashamed of it when I'm dealing with a citizen, right? Then and they'll explain to me why and what's going on. Where from our perspective, I think it's viewed as, and this is how I saw myself when I was taught, it's viewed as like a weakness, like,
Yeah.
and we can't let anybody see that we're weak. And like I said, when my therapist first told me I had PTSD, I'm like, what's wrong with me? Because I know my partner that also does sex crimes has seen the same shit I have. I know all the other detectives that have gone on these homicide cases with me, and they're all fine. What's wrong with me? And I was so ashamed and embarrassed, and I didn't want anybody to know. And my therapist is like, honey, you think they don't have it? They're just, everybody's coping in a different way, right? People are drinking, people are using drugs, people are having affairs, people are gambling, people are doing all these other things to cope. Or, they're getting therapy, but they're not telling anybody because God forbid anybody knows. And so I felt very alone and very isolated and very like, I did not want anybody to know. And so I think that's the difference. I think Nicole, as you said, we're good at hiding it. We don't want anybody to know. Where the general population will freely tell you, "Hey, I have this," and they're not ashamed of it.
Mm.
Yeah.
So like a real highlight here of the culture is what I'm hearing. Like this, not just like this, there's like a lot of shame around being some kind of way that is wrong for a first responder to be. Like Nick, like you said, you signed up for this. So that must mean that, you either do it or leave. Like just do it right or go.
Yeah.
And you're not going to go. This is This is more than just a job to
what I
you.
do, right?
So like you're going to learn, and that's where that conditioning comes in, right? You're going to really lean into what you've been taught probably as well, not just in the academy, but like again, culturally, socially. There's so much that's normalized. There's so much behavior that could be attributed to the signs we talked about that are just normalized. Like this is just how we cope. This is just what we do when really these are symptoms, these are signs, these are flags to look to and say, "Oh, you know, this isn't great for my overall health and well-being," but instead it's looked at as, "Nope, that's what we do and that's how we cope," right?
Mhm.
Which then only delays getting help and perpetuates less.
And
What's
I
that?
was I was afraid that like if they knew, like, are they
Yeah,
going to take my badge from me? Are they going to say you're unfit for duty,
right.
because clearly you're fucked up in the head.
Right. That's such a huge barrier that, especially I think for partners, I know for me, that was such an ongoing conversation with my wife early on. It, I would say, took years to consistently have an increasingly more respectful conversation. Because back then I was maybe not as respectful of her autonomy. And, it's just like, you need therapy. Like, obviously, I'm a therapist. I should know. Just do it. Right. Like, that doesn't work. Don't take that approach. I know. But just having an ongoing continuation of like, hey, that's still happening. Okay. Hey, I've noticed that's started happening. Okay. I've noticed that has stopped happening. And just like continuing to have an open dialogue. Because I think it's such a process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This process of going from the struggle getting harder and harder and harder. And then at what point do you say, okay, I can't keep doing it this way? And that I can imagine that is a true upheaval for your systems who have been taught and conditioned that help means you're broken. Help means you're weak. Help me, right? Like help means
Something wrong with you.
there's something wrong with you and maybe they're gonna not let you do this anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe you're gonna lose everything you've worked for. So, Nick, any thoughts around like the differentiation of how like I know you've shared a little bit already, but like anything else?
I think it is also a term that is getting used a lot lately and recently. And I'm not trying to take away anybody's trauma, right? But I think that
What term?
PTSD,
Okay.
right? Like I think that with learning these things, right? And learning how the brain happens, like it's becoming more acceptable. Um, I think our first responder community is still not accepting of it as
Hmm.
much, right?
Hmm.
So where we're recognizing people's traumas and things that happen to them in life, and we are okay with that in the civilian world, and we're still not fully okay with it in the first responder world.
Yeah. I agree. I think, like you said, it's a term that's being used a lot.
Yeah.
And because it does feel like every call I go on, I'm being told, "Hey, I have PTSD." It's like everyone I come into contact with who's calling for the police
Hmm.
has it. Um,
Hmm.
so, and I have noticed that,
Yeah.
more so in the last few years, and it is more accepted. But yeah, it's still, and I try to make a point to talk about it to my
Right.
coworkers.
Yeah.
I've gone from being in the closet about my PTSD, and not wanting anybody to know, to, and it is a process, like, right, like,
Right. Yeah.
denial, to eventually acceptance. And I want to be able to help my partners now. I realized, I'm not going to lose my job and all of these things. So if I can help by being out about my trauma,
Right.
Hmm.
maybe I can help others avoid everything that I went through.
And
Yeah.
I do the same way. So when I first started, and I call it my recovery journey, I've thought about writing a book, honestly, because I I feel, and I feel like it's a duty, right?
Yeah.
So we have this duty to serve, this duty to protect. I'm in a leadership position. How do I protect my people more?
Mm.
How do I protect them from seeing, or not seeing, but feeling the things that I am feeling? And how do I get them their help quicker, right? And how do I push that culture shift? How can I do that? And the way I can do that is being forthcoming and, like you said, coming out about my PTSD and my journey and how we got here, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I think like conversations like this need to happen. And I'm the same as you. I do it at the station. I do it with the people. I debrief after calls, um, and try to change that shift and be that person that can make it better for the people coming up.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah.
I tell my stories to the new kids, to anybody that will listen, and I try to normalize it, and it's
Yeah.
like, hey, in this career, we are going to see really bad things.
Yeah.
We're going to see horrible things that, thank God, the general population normally doesn't have to see, but it's gonna mess you up,
I mean, they put those stats out, right? That the average person sees maybe 4 to 7 traumatic. I don't know the number. I'm
Right.
gonna make it up right now. Okay, so don't.
In their
Lower,
lifetime,
Right,
right?
we'll work
much
with it.
less.
Right, 4 to maybe 7 in their lifetime,
I
Yeah.
and
see
we
that
see over
sometimes per day.
400. Right, that could be in a
Right.
day for me.
Right. Right.
There's only so many death notifications that I think I have left in me.
I know.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
I don't know when that last one's gonna come where I'll be like, I'm fucking done.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I can't do this anymore. And it how do we get the next generation to be able to continue to do this? It's especially with us getting busier, right?
Right.
Understaffed
Understaffed.
and all of those things. Like, how do we get this next generation of first responders? Because we're always going to be needed, right?
Yep.
Right.
We're always going to be needed. We need a human to do this part, right? There is compassion and empathy in the human connection that comes with our job.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And how do we get our next generation to be able to do that?
I want to talk about one more element of this piece around the kind of differentiation of how first responders experiencing post-traumatic injury can be presenting, can be how their experiences of trauma are then manifesting in their lives and what that looks like compared to maybe the average person. And I want to specifically lean into the suppression of anger and talk about that kind of experience of how not only, you guys aren't conditioned to suppress certain emotions, you're conditioned to repress and compartmentalize all emotions so that you can have access to your logical brain, problem solve, right, do the job. But that also then has an impact not just on like the feelings the good feelings that people tend to want to feel, but also like the other feelings that can really add up over time, and that being anger. And so I'm wondering what your perspective is on that, on like the conditioned response and also like the cultural concept of how anger is held, how irritability, agitation, like that energy is held for the first responder who's struggling with trauma.
So agitation is actually how I know my anxiety is getting higher, right? It's because I start to get more agitated. Um, I did not have the best childhood, and there was a lot of anger in my childhood. And that is one emotion that I will suppress like a champ, right?
I've
Because
noticed.
I'm glad you've noticed. Because I've seen what anger can do when it hits its worst,
Hmm.
right? And for me, being a product of that environment, right? Like my dad could get very angry,
Hmm.
especially if he was intoxicated. Um, and my mom too, and to just break the cycle,
Hmm.
right? I can't get angry because of that. This is something that me and my therapist have been working on. And she's like, well, if you're suppressing anger, you're suppressing all of them. I'm like, but I'm not. She's like, but you are. Right. And she's like, each like negative emotion has its opposite positive, right? So like anxiousness and like joy share a common kind of like
Excitement. Yeah.
excitement,
Mhm.
right? And she's like, so you have to be able to feel them all. And it's definitely something that we've been working on. But anger is one that I definitely, because you can't get angry on the same, right? If somebody's coming at me, I can't start yelling at them and I can't start hitting them and I can't start doing the things that normally, or what I have seen, anger brings,
Mhm.
right? So I have to sit with that a little bit more. And I feel like I need to suppress it a little bit more because we can't show our emotions when we're on call. Yeah.
No, especially with everything that we're doing being recorded, and
Absolutely. Yes.
not just by the public, but we're wearing cameras now too.
Right.
And it's like if you are arresting somebody and it sounds like you're angry, suddenly it's going to be used that this was personal or that you used too much force or whatever. So yeah, we can't be angry, and that's oh, it's interesting you bring that up because well, I guess I need to check in with my therapist on this because I started to think back and I'm like, I don't get angry. I don't. And now I'm thinking, okay, what's wrong with me? So um
As we've established, there's nothing wrong with you. Right.
I think I must yeah, I don't know. I
So, but
don't
this is what I'm talking about, right? Is that there's a baked in conditioning that you guys have very beautifully highlighted how you cannot function in the job if you are popping off all the time and letting things get you angry. And let me fucking tell you what, as a civilian who has heard the stories the last 10 years, I'm like, I would gladly challenge any civilian to go live that life for a day and not get angry. Just
I
saying.
mean, I have been called everything in the book. I have been terms I've never even known existed. I mean,
Yep.
and you if you let that get to you, I'd be an angry bitch all the fucking time.
And that's
Right.
why we got to go back to the sense of humor, right? Because
Right.
like I've got to like counter that, like you said, with something else, right?
Right.
And try
Right.
to diffuse the situation almost because, like you said, like you just can't with the cameras, with everything that's happening. You don't even want to be that person.
Right.
No.
But
Right.
then with the humor, then you're all then it's a catch 22, right? Because if you're too
Yeah.
funny, then you're taking it too lightly and you don't care. So it's like, it's a lose 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 all around.
Right.
But
Except in my personal life. I mean, I am the funniest person I know. Just ask me. I am very
Yes.
quick-witted and it's awesome. But
Yeah. But
Right.
right.
But yeah, you can't be that at work. And in looking into it, maybe, I don't know, maybe I suppress my anger too much, or if anything, it's probably, and I check myself on this, and I try not to be like this, but in the past I've tended to be a little passive aggressive
mhm.
sometimes, and I'm imagining that's
Yeah.
instead of letting myself be angry, I I'll say something that's passive aggressive.
I'd
That-
say I'm so passive aggressive
okay, I
sometimes.
love this.
I
So
hate it, and I check myself on it.
I love this that you brought this up because this is a good segue into the next question that I have. And that's like, how has this stuff impacted your personal relationships, your personal life? How has it come into play? And like, I think that's a good segue because, you're highlighting I'm a communication coach. I train clinicians on effective communication. So I am very familiar with passive aggression. Not that I'm passive aggressive, but the what the research shows is that passive aggression is actually more detrimental to our relationships than aggressive communication. So in that like that thread there, like what's been the spillover that you guys have seen and noticed in your lives? How have you managed it? What were the consequences?
Yeah, divorce for me, um, like I said, I mean, I think the PTSD probably played into that. I think, her physical injury, we both became different people than we were, I think, when we first met. And um, yeah, I was much more passive aggressive at that point in my life. I've since grown, with age comes wisdom, um, along with wrinkles and gray hairs. But the wisdom
Wisdom.
aspect of it has been wonderful, and with therapy. And so I say now I live, unapologetically authentic, and I didn't used to. I wasn't comfortable enough, brave enough, whatever. But having gone through a PTSD journey, in the process, and us queers are good about coming out of the closet, right? Most of us. So living as a queer woman, living as a first responder with PTSD, just getting comfortable. I think I've gotten good over the years, from moving from not being comfortable with who I am and in my own skin to being extremely comfortable with who I am and in my own skin. And so for me, that personal journey just made it more easier for me to be like, you know what, fuck it. I'm not going to walk around on eggshells. I'm not going to, be this passive aggressive person that I don't even like. I'm going to tell you how I feel, and we're going to talk about it. So I think, even in the past 5 years, the relationships I've been in have been a lot healthier. And I've tried to use, you can always look back and be like, God, I wish I hadn't done this, or I hadn't been in this situation, or I hadn't. But then I look at it as everything I've been through up to this point in my life, every relationship I've had has made me who I am now,
Yeah.
and through therapy and just age and wisdom, I really like who I am now. Right. And so I don't know. I just try to hold on to being intentional, being present, in the relationships I'm in, being authentic. And I have found it to be a much healthier place to be. And my relationships up to this point now have been much healthier. So
So glad to
I,
hear that.
I try to use, you take the bad and you make the best out of it, right?
You
That's all
learn.
you learn. I tell my son every day, not every day, but I try to
Every
preach
other day.
every other day that, you know what, like, we choose, I believe we choose what kind of day we're going to have by the attitude we pick, right? And so you can wake up and be like pissy and pissed off that the alarm went off and that you have to go to work and that you have to or you can choose to, you know what, I'm gonna have a good attitude today. I'm gonna go on and try to make a difference and do the best job I can, and you're gonna have a better day, right? So for me, it's about being intentional in life and choosing. I can choose to dwell on my PTSD and my trauma, or I can choose to try to make the best of it, try to help people. So
Spoken like someone who knows a little thing or two about post-traumatic growth.
And it's
yes.
I think that's a big thing, right? That growth in so I was really shitty at setting boundaries, right? Like, and being able to set boundaries kind of took that passive aggressiveness away.
Oh, it's funny how that works. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like, yeah. So, like being able to be like, no, I can't do this because these are the reasons why. Instead of being like, sure, if this is what we want to fucking do today, right? And
Right.
like being like, or like not even saying that and being like, yep, let's do it, right? And
And
like,
then inside you're like pissed off about it.
but you can't be angry, so let's put that back down.
Right,
Resentful.
right, right.
Right.
Then I'll be passive
Um,
aggressive, to
yeah.
show anger.
So, but like that boundary setting and being able to be, like you said, intentional, right? Being intentional, the boundary setting, um, truly did change relationships. And at first, starting little boundaries and getting the pushback, right? You'd be like,
Practice.
oh, I've got to do it because then you feel bad and guilt and shame and all of that comes into play, right? Because God damn the guilt and shame that comes
Mhm.
with everything too, because why not? But it allowed those relationships to build more, right? So
Mhm.
I have been truly blessed with Stephanie. We've been together for 18 years.
Oh, I
And
agree.
like she's amazing and she has seen me change as a person multiple times, right? Because I'm not the same person she met. I
Right.
was in paramedic school when we met, so I wasn't a first responder.
Mhm.
And if you don't like the first responder you have today, wait a couple years. There'll be a new one. There'll be a different person, right? Because we do change, right? And sometimes it's negative, sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's both.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think just having support that I never thought I had before was definitely a big change in that.
Yeah, Stephanie's a queen. Just have to say that. Love her.
She's gonna watch this
Thank
and love
you.
that part.
I love her.
Yeah,
She's the
yeah,
best.
yeah. She's my calm.
Yeah. That's the sense that I get when you talk about her and when I see you guys together. And it's a beautiful thing when you can have that counterpoint.
Yeah,
And it just offers that service to one another of moving through life, which is
yeah,
very fucking hard to do.
yeah.
I want to offer, just in the honor and the spirit of what you're really highlighting here, I want to offer my favorite quote about boundaries by the incomparable Brene Brown. And this is a quote that I literally use in like when I work with clients and when I do education about boundaries, because you're right, setting boundaries is a little bit more complicated than people think or like to
So hard.
think. And there is a trauma component to the lack of boundaries that exist in our lives, right? Like you mentioned, the guilt and the shame, they're not just emotions, they are very deep rooted, oftentimes trauma responses
Mhm.
that create an unbearable experience internally, for some people in the situation of saying no if you say no to protect yourself and your own peace, the amount of guilt and shame that can come up is just so unbearable. And we want to acknowledge that that is more than just being a passive person, or having a passive personality. There's deeper stuff to that. And so what Brene Brown says is that compassionate people ask for what they need. They say no when they need to, and when they say yes, they mean it. They're compassionate because their boundaries keep them out of resentment.
I love that.
What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
It just touched everything,
Everything, all of it,
all
Everything.
of it.
right?
Like, yeah.
I love that quote because it really reframes boundaries and from a different perspective of the people who struggle the most with setting boundaries consider themselves the most compassionate people, right? Like you're caregivers, right? You're people who always put yourselves on the back burner so that you can take care of everyone else. And so the self-concept is I'm compassionate because I'm selfless. And what she's saying is flipping that on its head and saying, actually,
Right.
that's a recipe for resentment that's going to lead you down a path that you're not going to recognize yourself and you're not going to like where it leads. So I just wanted to share that. It
And it
was really
did,
pivotal. Yeah,
Beautiful. Hmm.
right? It did lead down that path of not
Yeah.
of resentment. And
it
now,
it's
yeah,
crazy. It's
yeah.
wild how it starts to melt it away.
That is a beautiful, yeah. I love
Yeah.
that.
And I like that when you say yes, you mean it.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
yeah,
Both. It's
Not out of
both.
obligation or, well, I should do this because,
Yeah, I have to.
right.
right.
If I don't, there's going to be a lot of conflict, and so I'm afraid of that, and yada yada. So maybe we'll post that quote in the notes, in the
Please
show
do.
notes
Yeah,
for everybody,
Yeah.
because it's
absolutely.
such a gem.
I was going to tell you to send it to me.
Oh yeah, no problem. We'll do. I'll text it to you. So we're running down on time for our chat today, but what I would love to do is just kind of round out our conversation. This is gonna be an extended conversation. We're gonna definitely continue this conversation another day. But what do you feel like, just sitting with our conversation, talking about really intense, really complex things. Is there anything that you're actually stepping away from this call today with that feels like useful, that feels like a little shift, that feels interesting, that feels settling, that feels confusing, that feels like maybe sparks your curiosity, just something that you personally are walking away with from today?
I think for me, every time I talk about it, I walk away feeling a little bit more at peace, I think, and particularly in this safe circle here, a bit more validation, you know, from the therapist. Thank you. So, I always feel it's another way to release again, and it's like sometimes I think you can't have enough release of that. And so I feel very light and validated and um, hopeful that somebody might hear this and feel a little bit lighter themselves. So
Yeah,
I feel good.
love that. I'm so glad.
The exact same word came to me when she said, "How are you feeling?" Lighter was the instant word that came,
Mhm.
right? Um, and I know when I talk to people, right? Um, but in this setting, it seems more validating a little bit,
It does.
right? A little bit more rewarding to get that information out, a little bit more
Yeah.
resonating with each
Mhm.
other, I think, in our journeys. Um,
Empowering?
yeah, that's the
Mhm.
word. Couldn't get the word, right? Yeah.
I gotcha.
But like that feeling heard too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, by all means, not the same, but they are parallel journeys almost, right?
Right.
Like those those tracks waver, but it definitely always feels lighter to get it off. Today feels a little bit extra lighter,
Yeah.
right?
Same.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm so glad. I I think it's so beautiful that you both resonated with that sense of lightness, and it immediately made me think about how when we do when we do work around shame in like the clinical space, we like to highlight that, shame lives and thrives in darkness, in secrecy, in hiding. And so it almost seems like what you're both saying is along that thread of when you get to talk about these things that maybe instinctually the system wants to hide.
Mhm.
Every time you do that, there's something that offers a little bit of healing, a little bit of mending, because it's an alternative to the shame, the heavy shame that lives in that darkness. And what a beautiful then message, right? To kind of send our listeners off with for today is that, it wraps up into the whole conversation around post-traumatic injury and first responders and the shame that prevents people from getting help, and that makes them feel so scared to be seen in the need for help, that you guys are so brave to come on here and to have this conversation so openly and so vulnerably and say, hey, look, this is actually what healing can look like, is being in the light. So thank you guys so much. I love you both.
I love you.
You guys, thank you for doing this.
Oh, it is our pleasure, right,
It
Nick?
is. It is absolutely. Because like you said, we need a culture shift, and sometimes one voice can do that. So
Hmm.
if it's going to be our voices today, let it be our voices today.
I love that.
Well, then, I guess on that note, yeah, I love that deep breath I just saw you take. Um, it's good. It's good. The
It
deep
is good.
breath is a communication from the nervous system. It says, now we can relax a little bit. That is a wrap for today's episode of another RfP Spotlight Series episode, where courage meets community, and it certainly did today. If you guys were moved, inspired, or just reminded that you are not alone, please share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us at Responders for Pride on Instagram and Facebook so that we can keep this conversation going. Until next time, please stay proud, stay safe, and keep showing up for yourself and each other. Bye, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Bye.